The appointment was supposed to be routine. Dr. Adrian Cole had already listened to my heart, reviewed my blood pressure, and told me the medication seemed to be doing what he wanted. Then his assistant called him into the hallway for a question, and he stepped out, leaving me alone in his office for less than a minute. That was when I noticed the photograph. It sat behind a stack of medical journals near the corner of his desk, partly hidden by a file tray. I might not have looked twice if the woman in the picture had not been my wife. Claire was much younger in it, maybe in her late 20s. Her hair was longer, and she was smiling in a way I recognized immediately. Beside her stood another young woman I did not recognize at first, and on the other side was a younger Adrian Cole. For a few seconds, I simply stared. Claire and I had been married for 34 years. I had met Adrian only 6 months earlier, after my primary doctor referred me to him. Claire had never mentioned knowing him. The office door opened. Adrian came back in, took 2 steps toward his chair, and stopped when he saw where I was looking. His expression changed so quickly that I knew before I asked that the photograph mattered. "Why do you have a picture of my wife?" He did not answer. Instead, he walked behind the desk and looked at the frame as though he had forgotten it was there. "How long have you and Claire been married?" he asked. 34 years. He looked at me then. Not guilty. Not exactly. More like a man who had just realized 2 pieces of his life had collided without warning. I felt my pulse climbing. "Doctor, I asked you a question." "I know. Did you know my wife?" His eyes moved back to the photograph. "Yes." One word. Nothing else. I pointed toward the frame. "Then explain that." Adrian sat down slowly. For a moment I expected him to tell me they had dated before I met Claire, or that they had worked together, or that there was some perfectly ordinary explanation I had somehow missed. Instead, he said, very quietly, "Thomas, you need to ask Claire about Emily." The name hit me harder than anything else he could have said. Emily was Claire's younger sister. She had died before Claire and I married. In 34 years, Claire had spoken about her only a handful of times. I looked again at the second woman in the photograph, and suddenly I knew who she was. On the drive home, I kept hearing Adrian's last sentence. "Ask Claire about Emily." It would have been easy to turn the photograph into a confession before I had any facts. 30 years in operations had taught me something less dramatic. When 2 facts seemed impossible together, establish the sequence before deciding what they meant. The picture was old. Emily had died before Claire and I married. Whatever connected Claire to Adrian had begun before me. That did not make the secrecy harmless, but it mattered. Claire was in the kitchen when I got home, rinsing 2 coffee mugs. She looked up and asked how the appointment went. "Do you know Adrian Cole?" The mug stopped under the running water. She turned off the faucet. That small reaction told me more than a quick denial could have. "Why are you asking me that?" "Because there's a photograph of you in his office." The color seemed to leave her face. I waited. Finally, she said, "I knew him a long time ago." "How well?" Her eyes dropped to the counter. "Claire, what did he tell you?" "He told me to ask you about Emily." Her head came up sharply. He had no right to do that. It was the first thing she had said with certainty. "Why not?" "Because it isn't his story to tell." I watched her carefully. "Is it yours?" She did not answer. I thought about the photograph again. Claire, Emily, Adrian. 3 young people standing close enough to suggest familiarity, maybe affection, certainly history. "Were you and Adrian involved?" "No." The answer came immediately. No hesitation. "No, Thomas. Adrian and I were never lovers." Strangely, I believed her. I had expected that answer to bring relief. Instead, it made the photograph harder to explain. "Then why does he have a picture of you?" Her shoulders lowered slightly. "It wasn't my picture." "Whose was it?" "Emily's." There it was again. Emily. In 34 years of marriage, I could probably count on 2 hands the number of conversations Claire and I had. Had about her younger sister. I knew Emily had died young. I knew the family had gone through what Claire always called a difficult time. Whenever I had asked for more, she had gone quiet, and I had mistaken that silence for grief. "What happened to her?" I asked. "You know what happened?" "No. I know she died. I know it was before we got married. I know you hate talking about it. Those aren't the same thing." Claire folded the dish towel in front of her, then folded it again. She was struggling near the end. Our family was struggling too. It was complicated. "And Adrian?" She looked away. "What did he have to do with Emily?" "Thomas, please." I felt irritation rising, but underneath it was something worse. Not jealousy anymore. Exclusion. Claire stepped closer. You just came from a cardiology appointment. You're supposed to avoid stress. For a moment, I could not tell whether she was worried about my heart or grateful for a reason to stop the conversation. My heart isn't the reason we're having this conversation. I know. Then don't use it to end one. She closed her eyes briefly. I lowered my voice. I'm not accusing you of sleeping with him. I asked you directly, and I believe your answer. But that means something else happened. Something important enough that my cardiologist has kept a photograph connected to your dead sister for decades, and important enough that seeing it frightened you. It didn't frighten me. Then what did it do? She had no answer. I looked at the woman I had shared a home with for 34 years and realized there was a difference between respecting someone's grief and unknowingly living beside a locked door. Why didn't you ever tell me you knew him? Claire gripped the folded towel. Because that part of my life was over before you came into it. But it isn't over. I walked into his office today and found it sitting on his desk. Her eyes filled, though she did not cry. Please leave this alone. I shook my head. It was the first time I could remember her asking me not to touch something from her past, and the first time I knew I couldn't honor the request. No, Claire, I said. Not this time. That night, Claire went to bed before I did. I stayed downstairs with the television on and could not have told you a single thing that played. Her last words kept circling back to me. That part of my life was over before you came into it. The next morning, I went to the hall closet where we kept old photographs, tax records, Christmas decorations, and all the other things people save without expecting them to become evidence someday. I was not looking for a confession. I wanted a timeline. There were 3 family albums from Claire's 20s. The first showed the sisters everywhere together. Claire and Emily at birthdays, on a beach, beside an old station wagon. Emily was easy to recognize now. She had Claire's eyes but a narrower face and a habit of leaning toward the camera. Then, abruptly, she disappeared. The final pages of one album jumped from summer to almost a year later. No Emily. No explanation. I checked another album. Near the back were 4 empty photo corners pressed into a yellowing page. Whatever picture had been there was roughly the same size as the one on Adrian's desk. That did not prove much, but it proved something. The photograph had probably come from Claire's family. Adrian had not secretly taken some private picture of my wife. For the first time since the appointment, one suspicion loosened its grip. Then another memory replaced it. Early in our marriage, Claire once told me she had delayed leaving home after college because someone there needed her. I had always assumed she meant her mother. But looking at the dates written beneath the photographs, I realized her mother had already moved in with an aunt by then. I was still sitting on the floor with the albums around me when Claire found me. She stopped in the doorway. You went through those? There are family albums. You know what I mean. I held up the album with the empty corners. Was Adrian's photograph taken from here? Claire stared at the page. That was enough. Why was Emily suddenly gone from every picture? Thomas, stop. Did Adrian know her? Claire folded her arms tightly. Was he the person you stayed home for? No, then who was? She turned toward the hallway. I stood, but I did not follow her. You told me yesterday that Adrian and you were never involved. I believe you. She stopped. But every answer removes one possibility and leaves a bigger question behind. Claire faced me again. Her expression had changed from defensiveness to exhaustion. There are promises you don't understand. Then help me understand them. I can't or won't. Her jaw tightened. Some promises are not yours to break. I set the album on the table. Maybe not. But this marriage is mine too. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen and a truck passing outside. Ordinary sounds in a house that suddenly did not feel ordinary. Finally, Claire sat down. She looked at the photograph album rather than at me. Adrian loved Emily. The sentence landed with almost physical force. I sat across from her. Loved her? Yes. So the photograph was hers. Like I told you, relief came first, immediate and almost embarrassing. Whatever Adrian's connection to my wife was, I had been looking at it from the wrong direction. But Claire was crying now. Not loudly. She wiped one cheek and kept staring at the empty place on the album page. If Adrian loved Emily, I said, why have you spent 34 years acting as though none of this existed? Claire shook her head. Because it didn't end when Emily died. I waited. She seemed to realize she had already gone too far. Claire. She pressed both hands together. What didn't end? Her eyes finally met mine. Emily left us with someone who was still alive. Then she stood so quickly the chair scraped against the floor. And from the look on her face, I knew she wished she could pull the words back. Claire remained standing beside the chair, one hand gripping its back. I did not ask the question immediately. I was afraid that if I pushed too hard, she would retreat behind the same silence she had used for 34 years. "Someone," I finally said. She looked toward the hallway, then sat again. "Emily had a daughter." For a moment, the words did not fit anywhere in the version of Claire's family I knew. "A daughter? She was a baby when Emily died. You never told me Emily had a child." "I know. Where is she?" Claire rubbed her palms together. "She was raised by relatives. They became her parents in every way that mattered." "Your relatives?" "Family connected to us. People Emily trusted." I waited for more. None came. "And you were involved?" Claire nodded. "Emily needed help near the end. Things were difficult. There were arguments in the family, decisions being made too quickly, people who thought they knew what was best for her. I stayed because she needed someone." The old memory returned immediately. Someone at home needed me. All those years, I had supplied Claire's mother as the missing name because it was easier than asking another question. "You stayed for Emily?" "Yes." "And the baby?" Her eyes lowered. "Yes." Something else came back to me then. During the first years of our marriage, Claire had wanted children badly. We both had. There had been doctor visits, disappointment, and eventually the slow acceptance that our life would look different from what we had imagined. Some nights Claire had cried with a depth I thought I understood. Now I wondered how much of that grief had belonged to a child she had once held and never mentioned. I hated myself a little for the thought, because it turned her pain into evidence. But that was what secrecy did. It made innocent memories suspicious. Was Adrian the father? Claire went completely still. There it was. Not an answer. But not nothing. "Claire, I'm not answering that." "Why?" "Because there are parts of this that still aren't mine to give you." I stood and walked a few steps away before facing her again. "You told me Adrian loved Emily. You told me Emily had a baby. Now you refuse to tell me whether those facts are connected." It was complicated. That word is doing a lot of work. Her face tightened. "You think I don't know that?" I did not want to fight. More importantly, I did not want anger to become an excuse for either of us to say something we could not take back. So I lowered my voice. "What happened to the child after Emily died?" "She stayed with the people who were already caring for her. Eventually, they raised her as their daughter." "And Adrian?" Claire looked away again. That frightened me more than if she had shouted. Later, while returning the albums to the closet, I noticed a small old envelope tucked beneath one of them. I recognized Claire's handwriting on the outside, but there was no message, only Emily's name. I carried it to the kitchen. "Claire." She saw the envelope and closed her eyes. "I wasn't searching for that. It was under the album." She did not tell me to put it back. Inside was a small hospital keepsake card, faded at the edges. A date. A baby girl's first name. Emily's name beneath it. No father was listed. It was not proof of anything beyond what Claire had just admitted. But it made the child real. Claire reached across the table and gently took the card from my hand. "I kept this because it was Emily's." I nodded. Then I said the thing I had been trying not to say. If Adrian was that child's father, was he allowed to know she survived? Claire's eyes filled again. "You're making this simpler than it was." "Then make it less simple." "I can't. Not yet." I stared at her. The affair I had feared in Adrian's office was disappearing piece by piece. In its place was something I found harder to measure. "If you keep refusing to tell me," I said, "the silence starts becoming part of the answer." Claire held the little hospital card against her palm. And for the first time, I wondered whether the secret she had protected all these years was not about whom she had loved, but about a father who might have lost his daughter without ever knowing she was alive. My next appointment with Adrian was already scheduled. 2 days later, I sat in the same waiting room wondering whether keeping it made me sensible or cowardly. I didn't need the follow-up. My medication had been adjusted, and Adrian was still my cardiologist. I was not inventing an excuse to see him. When he entered the examination room, he knew immediately why I had come with more than medical questions. "Claire told me about Emily's daughter," I said. Adrian remained standing for a moment. Then he pulled the stool closer and Saturday, "How much did she tell you?" "That Emily had a baby. That relatives raised her. That you loved Emily." I paused. "She won't tell me whether you were the father." Something passed across his face, but it was not surprise. "I can tell you what happened to me," he said. "I can't speak for Claire." It was a careful boundary, and I respected it. Then tell me what happened to you. Adrian looked toward the window. Emily and I were together for nearly 2 years. I loved her. When she became pregnant, things between us were already falling apart. Both families were involved. Everyone had an opinion. Emily became frightened and angry, and eventually she stopped taking my calls. You knew she was pregnant? Yes. Did you believe the baby was yours? I believed it could be. That answer caught me. Could be. Adrian nodded once, but did not explain further. What happened after the birth? I never saw Emily again. The room seemed smaller. Someone from her family contacted me later. I was told Emily had died. And the baby? His voice changed. I was told the baby died too. I thought of the hospital card in Claire's hand. She didn't. I know that now. How did you find out? Years later. Through people who had known the family. Nothing dramatic. Just one conversation that contradicted what I'd been told, then another that confirmed a child had survived. And Claire knew. Yes. The word carried no anger now. Whatever anger Adrian had once felt had apparently been worn down by time. You confronted her? Eventually. What did she say? That the child had been raised in a stable family and that I had no right to tear apart her life because of something I wanted. Did she tell you where she was? No. Did you try to find her? Adrian was quiet before answering. I thought about it for years. But by the time I knew she was alive, she wasn't a baby waiting for someone to claim her. She was a person with parents, a home, a history. Claire asked me not to force myself into that without knowing what the young woman herself had been told. That sounded like Claire. Protective enough to become immovable. I looked at him. So you accepted that? Not immediately. For the first time, I could hear the old hurt underneath his professional calm. But eventually I understood that finding someone and having the right to enter their life are different things. I thought about the photograph. Why keep Emily's picture on your desk? His eyes moved toward the office beyond the examination room. Because it's one of the last photographs of her I have. And Claire just happens to be standing in it. Yes. The suspicion that had started all of this finally collapsed completely. There had been no hidden romance between my wife and my cardiologist. I should have felt relieved. Instead, one question remained. Adrian, are you Emily's daughter's father? He looked at me for a long time. When he answered, there was no mystery in his voice, only exhaustion. I spent half my life believing I was. I waited. Then he said, I still don't know. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Everything I had built in my mind rearranged itself again. Claire was not protecting proof that Adrian had lost his daughter. She was protecting uncertainty. And suddenly the question waiting for me at home was no longer what Claire knew. It was why she had decided, for 34 years, that I could not know it with her. When I got home, Claire was sitting at the kitchen table with Emily's hospital card in front of her. She did not ask how the appointment went. She looked at my face and seemed to know. Adrian told me what he knew. I said. Claire nodded slowly. He said he was told the baby died. Her eyes closed. He also said he still doesn't know whether he was her father. For several seconds, Claire said nothing. Then she pulled out the chair across from her. Sit down, Thomas. I did. She touched the edge of the hospital card. Emily didn't know either. There it was. The piece neither of them had given me. Claire told me that by the time Emily realized she was pregnant, her relationship with Adrian had already become unstable. They had separated more than once. During one of those separations, there had been another man. Emily never gave Claire certainty about which man was the father because she did not have certainty herself. Why not find out? I asked. It wasn't as simple then as you're making it sound now. I let that go. What did Emily want? Claire stared at the card. Near the end, she was terrified. Not just about dying. About what would happen afterward. Adrian's family had opinions. Our family had opinions. The relatives who were helping with the baby had opinions. Everyone thought loving that child gave them the right to decide her future. And Emily? She wanted the fighting to stop. Claire explained that relatives already helping with the baby had agreed to raise her permanently. Emily trusted them. More than anything, she wanted her daughter to grow up without becoming the prize in a fight between adults who could not even agree on who her biological father was. So she asked you to lie to Adrian? Claire flinched. No. She asked me not to identify either possible father unless her daughter someday chose to ask about where she came from. But Adrian was told the baby died. I didn't tell him that. Did you correct it? Her silence answered. I leaned back. That's the part one can't get past. I know. When Adrian discovered years later that she was alive, you still wouldn't tell him where she was. I had made a promise to Emily. And when you married me, Claire looked at me. That promise didn't require you to hide Emily's daughter from me. No, it was the first answer she had given me that contained no defense. I thought about the early years of our marriage, the conversations about children, the appointments, the months when hope slowly became something we stopped discussing because discussing it hurt too much. How many times were you thinking about her while we were going through all that? Claire's mouth trembled. A lot. I looked away. That hurt more than I expected. I had believed those years belonged entirely to us. Now I understood that some of Claire's grief had another name, another face, another history I had never been allowed to see. I wanted to tell you, she said. Early on. Then after we'd been married a few years. Again when we started talking about children. Every time I waited, telling you became harder because then I also had to explain why I hadn't told you before. So you waited another year. Yes. And another. Yes. 34 of them. She wiped her cheek. I thought I was protecting Emily's daughter. After a while, I think I was protecting myself too. That admission silenced me. I could understand a frightened sister making a promise beside someone she was about to lose. I could even understand why Claire had hesitated when Adrian reappeared years later. But I could not make Emily responsible for my marriage. Why didn't you trust me? I asked. I did trust you. No. You trusted me with the life you chose to show me. Claire lowered her head. I was afraid that once I told you, you would see me differently. I do see you differently. She looked up. Not because she had protected Emily. Not because she had loved a child who disappeared into another family. Not even because she had kept Adrian away. I saw her differently because every year we had been married, she had decided for me that this truth was too dangerous to share. That wasn't Emily's decision, I said. Claire nodded, tears running freely now. No, whose was it? She took a long breath. That part was mine. I stood. Claire looked frightened. Where are you going? I don't know. Somewhere I can think without turning this into something uglier than it already is. Thomas, I'm not leaving our marriage tonight. I needed her to hear that. But I can't sit here and tell you this is fine because I understand why it started. She did not try to stop me. I picked up my keys and walked toward the door, carrying no proof of an affair, no secret romance, and almost no mystery about Emily anymore. What I carried instead was the knowledge that my wife had spent 34 years deciding which parts of the truth I was allowed to live with. That night, I stayed in a small hotel less than 10 minutes from our house. I did not choose it for comfort. I chose it because it was close enough that leaving did not become a declaration I had never intended to make. I barely slept. Every time anger began arranging the story into something simple, I forced myself back to what I actually knew. Emily had been dying. She had been afraid that her daughter would become the center of a fight between families and two possible fathers. She had asked Claire to protect the child's stability unless the girl someday chose to ask about her origins. I could understand that promise. I could even understand Claire refusing to give Adrian an address years later. By then, the baby had become a young woman with parents and a life of her own. Adrian's pain did not automatically give him permission to enter it. But none of that explained me. Emily had never asked Claire to keep me outside the truth. That choice belonged to my wife. By morning, I understood why that distinction mattered. If I treated everything Claire had done as betrayal, I would be ignoring the frightened sister she had once been. If I excused 34 years of silence because the original promise came from grief, I would be pretending our marriage had not paid part of its cost. I drove home shortly after 9. Claire was at the kitchen table. There was a sheet of paper in front of her. I called Adrian, she said. I stopped. You did. This morning. I told him I was done making the same decision for everyone. She pushed the paper toward me. It was a letter. Claire explained that she still had a legitimate way to reach the relatives who had raised Emily's daughter. She had never used it to reveal Adrian or force contact. For years, simply knowing that route existed had allowed her to tell herself she was honoring Emily. Now she was prepared to risk losing the trust of those relatives. More importantly, she was prepared to stop interpreting Emily's promise as permission for permanent silence. I'm not going to tell her Adrian is her father, Claire said. We don't know that. I nodded. What will you tell her? That there are unanswered questions about her biological history. That people who knew Emily are still alive. And if she wants answers, we'll give her what we actually know. And if she doesn't, then we stop. I read the letter. There was no plea for forgiveness in it. No demand that the woman meet Claire or Adrian. Claire had written that she was sorry information had been withheld and that any next step would belong entirely to her. You haven't sent it. No, why? Claire looked at me. Because I wanted to. Know whether this is another decision I'm making because I'm afraid. I sat across from her. For decades, Claire had treated silence as protection. Breaking it now could damage relationships she had preserved since Emily's death. It could make Adrian angry all over again. It could make Emily's daughter angry at everyone. There was no clean choice left. Only a fairer one. I picked up a pen. This sentence, I said, pointing near the middle. You're still telling her what Emily wanted before you tell her she gets to decide what she wants. Claire read it again. Then she crossed it out. We spent the next 20 minutes removing anything that sounded like justification. When we finished, the letter was shorter. Claire looked at me. Do you think I should send it? I thought about Adrian. About Emily. About Claire carrying a promise until it had become something larger than the person who made it. Then I thought about the woman at the center of all of it. I don't think that decision belongs to you anymore, I said. And it doesn't belong to Adrian. It definitely doesn't belong to me. Claire understood. It belongs to her. Yes. Claire folded the letter and placed it in an envelope. Watching her seal it did not restore my trust. It did something smaller and perhaps more important. For the first time since I saw that photograph, Claire was not deciding what another person was allowed to know. She was giving the choice back. The letter did not produce an answer the next day or the day after that. A week passed. Then another. Claire never suggested sending a second message, and Adrian did not ask me to pressure her. That mattered. For once, everyone involved seemed willing to let the person at the center of the story control its pace. The reply came through the same family connection Claire had used to send the letter. Claire read it first, then handed it to me. Emily's daughter knew she was adopted. She knew Emily was her biological mother. Her parents had told her that much years ago, and she had grown up understanding that another woman had given birth to her and died when she was very young. What she had never been told was that there had been uncertainty about her biological father. She was not angry in the way I had imagined. Her words were careful. She wanted information, but she did not want strangers arriving in her life, carrying expectations she had never agreed to meet. For now, she wanted everything in writing. Claire respected that immediately. So did Adrian. When Claire told him, he did not ask for a phone number or an address. He wrote down what he remembered about Emily, the dates they had been together, what he had known about the pregnancy, and what he had been told afterward. He did not call himself her father. He could not. That restraint changed something for me. A short time later, Claire and Adrian sat together for the first controlled conversation about what would be shared. I was there because Claire asked me to be, and because this time she was not building a private wall around the past. Seeing them together finally made the photograph understandable. There was no hidden romance between them. No secret life Claire had shared with Adrian instead of me. They were two people who had loved Emily differently, and then spent decades carrying different pieces of what happened after she died. Adrian had carried the belief that a baby might have been his and had died. Claire had carried the knowledge that the child survived, along with a promise she believed required silence. And Emily's daughter had grown up outside both versions, unaware that the uncertainty existed at all. The photograph had never been evidence of adultery. It was evidence of a family history Claire had erased from the story she told me. That distinction mattered, but it did not erase the damage. That evening, after Adrian left, Claire and I sat at the same kitchen table where so much of the truth had finally come out. I understand why you protected her, I said. Claire waited. I understand why you didn't give Adrian an address when he found out she was alive. I even understand why, at the beginning, you thought keeping Emily's promise meant saying nothing. But understanding it doesn't give me back 34 years of knowing you fully. Claire looked down. I know. I don't need you to apologize for loving your sister. I need you to understand what you took from me. Her eyes lifted to mine. You decided I couldn't be trusted with your grief. You decided I couldn't know why certain years were hard for you. Every time you almost told me and stopped, you made that decision again. I was afraid you'd see me differently. I do. She absorbed that without defending herself. Then I reached across the table. But differently doesn't mean I stopped loving you. Claire began to cry. I did not tell her everything was forgiven. I did not believe trust worked that way. I'm staying, I said. But staying isn't the same as pretending this didn't matter. She nodded. What do you need from me? No more deciding what truth I'm allowed to carry. All right. And whatever happens next with Emily's daughter, she decides. Not you. Not Adrian. Not me. Yes. Adrian understood the same thing. If she eventually wanted biological testing, he would cooperate. If she wanted only written answers, that was what she would receive. If she decided she wanted nothing more, he would accept it. For the first time since I had seen that photograph, nobody was trying to control the ending. We were finally allowing the woman whose life had been shaped by everyone else's decisions to choose what happened next. Repair did not happen in one conversation. It happened in smaller moments that would have been easy to miss if I were still waiting for some dramatic proof that our marriage had survived. Claire began talking about Emily, not only about the pregnancy or the months before she died. She told me ordinary things. Emily sang loudly in the car and never remembered the second verse of anything. She hated tomatoes but put ketchup on almost everything. When they were teenagers, she once borrowed Claire's favorite sweater without asking, ruined it, then spent 2 weeks pretending she had no idea where it had gone. The first time Claire laughed while telling me one of those stories, she stopped halfway through as though laughter itself were disrespectful. Keep going, I said. So she did. Slowly, Emily stopped being the dead sister whose name ended conversations. She became someone I could imagine. Sitting beside Claire at a kitchen table, irritating her, making her laugh, asking too much of her, and finally trusting her with a promise that Claire had never learned how to put down. That did not excuse the years of silence, but it helped me understand the person inside them. Emily's daughter continued corresponding cautiously. Sometimes weeks passed between messages. Claire never complained. Adrian did not push. Whether she would eventually ask for biological testing remained her decision. By then, I understood that discovering which man had been her biological father was not the answer our story required. The important truth was already known. She had survived. She had been loved by the parents who raised her. And now she possessed information about her own history that other people had withheld for too long. Claire and I were changing too. When something difficult came up, I noticed her old instinct to protect me from it. Sometimes she would begin, "There's something I wasn't sure I should tell you," and then stop herself. Now she finished the sentence. Trust did not return because I declared forgiveness. It returned in those moments, one uncomfortable truth at a time. Several weeks later, I went back to Adrian's office for another follow-up. My numbers were better. "Whatever you're doing," he said, looking over my chart, "keep doing it. I'm trying to have fewer family mysteries." He almost smiled. Then I saw the photograph. It was still on his desk. The same frame. The same 3 young people. But this time Adrian had not pushed medical journals in front of it. I stood and walked closer. "May I?" He nodded. I picked it up. Now I knew which woman was Emily. I knew Adrian had loved her. I knew why Claire was standing beside them. I knew that somewhere beyond that photograph was a baby none of them had known how to protect without also hurting someone else. The first time I saw the picture, I thought it proved my wife had shared a secret life with another man. I had been wrong. The harder truth was that Claire had carried part of her own life alone while standing beside me for 34 years. That hurt differently, but hurt was no longer the only thing attached to the photograph. It had brought Emily back into Claire's life as someone she could speak about instead of someone she had to guard. It had given Adrian the chance to tell what he actually knew without claiming what he could not prove. It had given Emily's daughter the choice to ask questions on her own terms. And it had forced Claire and me to confront something our comfortable marriage had allowed us to avoid. Love did not give either of us the right to decide what truth the other person could handle. Adrian watched me studying the picture. "I can put it away," he said. I looked at Claire's younger face beside her sister. For decades, everyone in that photograph had been connected by something missing. An answer, a person, a truth someone believed should remain unspoken. Putting the picture away would not protect anyone now. I set it carefully back on his desk. "No," I said. "I think we've hidden it long enough.